the third week of our series called Valleys. And in this series, we are talking about pain and suffering. And it's incredibly complex. It's incredibly difficult. It's an incredibly emotional topic. And it's very complicated because it doesn't look the same for anybody. And so to get up and teach on pain and suffering is tough. And as I prepared this week, this has been one of the hardest sermons I've had to prepare for just because it's not simple. And I really loved this series idea. When Brad said, I'm thinking about teaching this, I was like, go get him, Tiger. And then he's like, I need you to teach. I was like, I hate this series. Moving on, I'm done with it. But truly, people have spent their lives trying to figure out how humanity processes and deals with pain and suffering. Theologians have spent their life trying to look at it from a biblical perspective and say, what do we do? How do we respond? What's a biblical reaction to pain and suffering? And it's not easily navigated. And so it's something Brad said, but I just want to reiterate, we're not going to fully unpack this in 30 minutes today. Nor will we, in 6 weeks of this series, will we fully unpack or answer all your questions. But we are hoping that throughout this series that you would find hope in Jesus. That throughout this series you would be encouraged, that you would begin to see with greater clarity what it looks like for you and I to walk through pain and suffering, knowing that with sensitivity, you and I can walk through this and we can be strong and God will use it and He will redeem what is broken and hard in our lives. So that's our hope for this series. If you've missed any of it, you can visit our website, check that out, because they're all available online for you. Before we jump into open up the Bible and kind of looking at some of the passages that we want to dive into today, I want to start by talking about birthdays. And that seems like an odd place to start when we're talking about pain and suffering, that I'm going to start by talking about birthdays. And I think it ties, but if it doesn't, we're going to talk about birthdays for a minute, and then we're going to talk about pain and suffering, and so that'll be okay too. But birthdays have been on my mind a lot lately. I recently turned 35 years old about a month ago. About 2 weeks ago, my son Cruz turned 7 years old. And up until this point in our boy's life, my wife and I, when it comes to birthday parties, have had this unspoken rule for our boys that when you have a birthday party, you can have 2 or 3 friends at your birthday party, and we're going to invite a bunch of family. That's like the unspoken rule. We've kind of set the bar at that, and it's been very good thus far. We've had birthday parties. They've been a success. We've had food and cake and ice cream and presents and piñatas, and everybody's had fun, and no one's died, and it's been good. And this year, my son Cruz, who turned 7, he convinced my wife and I to let him have what he called a friend's birthday party. What's a friend's birthday party, you might ask? It's a parent's worst nightmare. That's what a friend's birthday party is. It's one of a parent's worst nightmares, truly. But my wife and I were like naive and like, yeah, how bad could a friend's birthday party be? Let's do this. So we're like, cool, have a friend's birthday. So Cruz invited about 15 of his friends from Hutton. Yeah, we messed up. Yeah, we recognize that in hindsight, okay? But he invited about 15 of his friends, and the plan was my son loves basketball. He's really into basketball, and so we actually came to Summit, and we went down in the gym, and we were going to play, we had a plan. We were going to play basketball for 45 minutes. We were going to eat pizza. We were going to eat cake. We were going to open presents, hit the piñata. Everybody's going home. It's going to be good. That was the plan. Very simple, right? Sounds like we've got it. No. No. So it started off great. We had everybody here, and parents brought their kids, and some parents hung out, some dropped off, which is all good. And I got all the boys lined up, and I kind of tried to separate teams for basketball, and I started to kind of tell them the basic rules just in case they didn't know and what way they were going. And I was like, you guys ready? And then I look over, and then there's this one little dude, and he's crying. And I'm like, Pastor Dad, I get down. Hey, bud, what's wrong? I want to be on that team, and I'm on this team, and okay, so we navigate this whole thing, right? And I kind of calmly navigate this thing, and we get it going, and we play basketball, and we start playing, and 2 minutes into playing basketball, here come 2 more dudes crying, and I'm like, oh, got some more criers on our hand, right? Kind of kneel down again. Guys, what's going on? Oh, we bumped knees, and it hurts, and this and that. I'm like, you guys want ice? You want to play basketball? You want to be criers? You want to be little dudes, right? We want to be little dudes. So I'm like, go get them, right? And so they go out and they start playing basketball again. A minute later, and I'm not making this up, a minute later, another kid comes up to me crying. He's like, what? And at this point, I'm starting to like lose it a little bit. I'm like, this can't be happening. Like, we're not very much into this party and we've got a lot of criers. And this other little dude, and he's like, I hurt my head. And I'm like, okay. And so we play basketball a little bit longer. And over the course of about 15 or 20 minutes of playing basketball, all but 3 of the boys cried. This is not made up. Like, they cried. And I'm just like, man, what is happening? Like, and they cried from, I got poked in the eye, to no one's passing them the ball, to I can't make a shot, and everything in between. And to make matters worse, I have parents and family members, they're sitting on the sideline and they're watching me as I try and navigate all this. And I'm trying to keep spirits high, and it's in this moment that I'm starting to sweat, and I don't sweat easily. I'm not Brad. And so Pastor low blow right there. But I just don't. And I'm like, I feel myself starting to sweat, and I'm starting to lose my patience a bit. And finally, I'm like, guys, stop. Like, we're done. We're done playing basketball. And of course, that was met with like more booze and sad. And but I was like, okay, we got to do something different. So I try and get these guys in a circle. And I've never had so much trouble in my life of getting any human beings in a circle as in this moment. And like, I'm trying, so like this half, I'm like, okay, you guys know what a circle looks like. Like, sit in that and spread out. And like, I turn my back on these kids and they run off. And I'm like, oh. So I go get these kids over here, and then these kids run off. And like, it was like a mini riot broke out. And they were like a pack of wolves. And they were ruthless, and they could sense that I'd lost control. And I remember thinking, and I remember thinking as this party unfolded, this is going down as the worst birthday party ever. Like, ever. There's hurt kids, there's chaos, there's crying. Before it was all over, I had kids ripping off their shirt, taking the frosting from the cake, putting it under their armpits as deodorant. Some of you parents right now are like, mental note, don't let your kids hang out with the Kimmet boys. Respect. But it was nuts. It was madness. And in the midst of it all, I remember there was this moment where at the peak of the chaos, I could feel myself losing it. Like, I was starting to get angry a little bit, because I was like, this is not how we had this plan, guys. This is not how it was drawn up. And I didn't know what to do. And I have people on the sideline, and they're watching me, and they're like, how's this guy going to navigate this? Is he going to scream at him? Is he going to be kind? What's he going to do? They're laughing at me. And I knew I had to keep it all together. And my blood was boiling. I was sweating. And it was one of those moments where I felt like it's not okay right now to not be okay. Like, this is not an okay time to lose it. Like, I have to keep it together. Who gets frustrated at their kid's birthday? Who screams at a 7-year-old's birthday party? Like, what is wrong with me? Now, all things considered, now, track with me. I'm obviously talking about a seemingly ridiculous example, but my guess is every single one of us in this room can relate with those emotions at some point or another, right? Because I think there comes these moments in our life, and particularly when pain and suffering comes into our life, there are these moments when real trauma, when heartache comes our way, that we feel like it's not okay for me to not be okay right now. We feel like I have to keep it together. I have to be strong. Yet simultaneously, there's this tension we're wrestling with, because we have all these questions that we don't have the answers to, and we don't know what's happening, and we're trying to process our emotions, but we just feel like I have to keep it together. I have to be strong, and we're upset, and we're frustrated, and we're angry, and we're mad at the situation, and maybe even with God himself. And we feel like, I don't know what to do. And some of us are like, I don't even know if I can feel this way towards God. And so what do we do in those moments? Because you've experienced this, and maybe some of you, it's been simpler than others, but we've all experienced this. You see, there's no recipe for walking through pain and suffering. There's no template that we just follow A, B, C, D. But I think the Bible does lay out some ways in which you and I can navigate pain and the brokenness of our world. And as we open up the Bible, I think one thing becomes increasingly clear. And that's this. that it's okay to not be okay. In the midst of your pain and suffering, it's okay to not be okay. And some of you need to hear that today. And you need to let those words wash over you and know that when difficulty comes, when trial comes, it's okay to not be okay. But I think too often in our culture, there's this tension we wrestle with where there is just not enough time and not enough room provided for lamentation. Lamentation is this idea of just an expression of grief and sorrow, emotions. There's a section in our Bible called Psalms, a lot of which is lamentation. It's just processing emotions. But today, in our culture, we don't feel like we have that space or that time. We feel like we have to keep it all together. We don't feel like there's an opportunity for you and I just to say, where are you, God? What's happening in my life right now, God? Why aren't you here? Why aren't you fixing this? Why aren't you making it better, God? We don't feel like we have that space. And if someone hears us, or if we vocalize those words to someone else, what are they going to think? What's that going to say about us? What's that going to say about our faith? And so we feel like we just can't grieve the way we need to grieve because there's so much pressure for you and I, specifically as Christians, to rejoice in the trial. We just feel this tension of we need to rejoice in the trial. And although as noble as that may be, maybe, it's pretty unrealistic sometimes, isn't it? So what do we do? How do we respond? How should we respond? Is it even okay for you and I to be mad, frustrated, angry with God? Is that even okay for us? I think sometimes in our pain and suffering, there's this tension we face, and it feels impossible. And in the midst of winter, I try and think about summer as much as possible, so I will use this example. Have any of you ever tried to take a huge beach ball and keep it underwater in a pool? Have anybody ever tried that? It's impossible, right? But yet we keep trying. We take this huge beach ball and we try and push it underwater, at a lake, at a pool, whatever. You're trying to push it underwater. But because of the buoyancy of the ball, no matter what we do, what's going to happen? That ball's coming right back up to the surface, right? No matter how hard we push, no matter how hard we try and suppress, that ball is coming back up. Some of you think you're on it. You're like, I'll lay on this thing. And you lay on it. It goes ding, ding, flip, and you're done. You lose. Ball wins. But if we can be really honest, sometimes that's what it feels like to be a Christian in the midst of trials and pain. It feels like we're trying to keep this huge beach ball underwater. And you're trying so hard, and it's not working. And people run into you and hey, what's wrong? And you're like, I'm a Christian, and I'm trying hard. And I don't know what to do, and I'm mad at God, and I don't know how to process my emotions, and I don't know how to respond to any of this, and it just seems impossible. And today I want to open up the Bible, and I want to look at a couple of passages where we see people processing through trial, processing through pain, and I want to look at how they respond. Because we live in a culture where the unspoken rule of thumb is that we should never express doubt or complaints to God. And personally, I have a really hard time with that. Because if we want to consider our relation, or we want to consider ourselves to be in a relationship with God, and I would say if you're here and you've accepted Jesus, you're in some form or another in a relationship with God. But if we consider ourselves to be in a relationship with Him, shouldn't we bring our disappointments and our frustrations and our anger to Him? Right? That's what we do in other relationships. Why is our relationship with God different? But we treat it differently. I want to open up our Bible, and I want to start in Psalm 44, and I'm just going to run through a couple of scriptures. And so if you're tracking with me, we're going to kind of jump around, but we're going to be in Psalm 44, and this is a psalm that's been largely attributed to David. And a little background is in this psalm, in Psalm 44, it's during the Babylonian exile, and it's a time of great despair for the Jews. This is a time where things are going wrong, and they are crying out to God, God, please rescue us. God, we hope you will rescue us from this. And it says this in Psalm 44. We're going to look at verse 8, 9, and then 22 through 26. And I'm just kind of cutting the middle section out just because I think these verses specifically get to what we're talking about today. But it says this, it says, "In God we have boasted continually, and we will give thanks to your name forever. But you have rejected us and disgraced us and have not come out with our armies." Jump to verse 22. "Yet for your sake we are killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. Awake, why are you sleeping, O Lord? Rouse yourself. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face? Why do you forget our affliction and our oppression? For our soul is bowed down to the dust. Our belly clings to the ground. Rise up and come to our help." The author is crying out, where are you, God? Do you even see what we're going through? Do you see the pain that's happening right now? What I love is this isn't a filtered response. This is raw emotion of someone saying, in the midst of my pain and the suffering, God, we're broken and you're nowhere to be found. Are you asleep? What's the matter with you, God? Help us. I want to jump over to the book of Jeremiah and look at another passage. The prophet Jeremiah likens God to flowing water that seems to be permanent but dries up. And it says this in Jeremiah 15:18. This is Jeremiah crying out to God. "Why is my pain unceasing, my wound incurable, refusing to be healed? Will you be like a deceitful brook? Will you be like a body of water that said it was going to be eternal and forever and is now dried up and gone, like waters that fail?" God, where are you? This isn't what I signed up for, God. This isn't how I pictured this unfolding. Look at Psalm 69 with me. This is David speaking. He says, I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters and the flood sweeps over me. I'm weary with my crying out. My throat is parched. God, do something. I'm sinking. I can't take it. I'm drowning here, God. I've cried out to you so much. My throat is parched and you are nowhere to be found. I'm doing everything I know, God. Please intercede. And maybe one of the toughest passages we'll look at today is found in Job 3. And we've looked at Job throughout this series. But I want to read it to you from the Message because it really, I think, drives home how Job is feeling. But it says this in 3:1-8. "Blake out the night I was conceived. Let it be a black hole in space. May God above forget it ever happened. Erase it from the books. May the day of my birth be buried in darkness, shrouded by fog, swallowed by the night. And the night of my conception, the devil take it. Rip the date off the calendar and delete it from the almanac. Oh, turn the night into pure nothingness. No sounds of pleasure from that night ever. May those who are good at cursing curse that day." Whew. As I read that, can't you feel Job's pain? Can't you feel a little bit what Job's experiencing right there? Job's literally saying, God, it would be better if I was dead than to go through this. I would rather be dead, God, than to go through what I'm enduring right now. He's lost all desire to live. And there is section after section in our Bible where we can turn and we can open up and we can see hurting people crying out to God. We see their despair. We see their pain being vocalized. We see in those scriptures right there, men crying out, God, how could you? God, why would you? God, where are you? Are you even real? Are you there? Do you see me? Do you see what's happening in my life? God, do something, please. But I don't think any of that catches God off guard. I don't think any of those passages we read, I don't think when you and I experience pain and suffering and the emotions we feel, and in the midst of that when we cry out, I don't think any of it catches God off guard. Because let's not forget, God is our creator, right? He created us with emotions. He created us. This was part of his plan for humanity. And I'm telling you that to say, when we come into pain and suffering, we don't need to stuff our emotions. We don't need to try like that beach ball to push it underwater and pretend like it's going to go away. We don't have to try and fight the fight. It's okay to not be okay. We don't have to try and be strong. We don't have to try and keep it all together. That is not only theologically incorrect, but for us to do that is actually bad for our physical health. It's a detriment to ourselves. A recent study conducted by psychologists from Harvard School of Public Health found that suppressing emotions significantly increases the risk of dying from heart disease and certain forms of cancer. Simply put, the research says that if you and I don't find a way to express our emotions in relationships, we're going to experience very terrible things in our physical body. And when I say that, I don't mean just express our emotions to people. Like, don't just express our emotions, but if we're truly in a relationship with God, should we not be expressing our emotions to Him as well? It's a healthy thing for us to do. When my son Cruz was born, I remember my wife and I brought him home from the hospital, and it was one of those moments as parents where you're like, we don't have any idea what we're doing, right? You bring, side note, but does anybody find it ironic that, to get a driver's license, you have to pass a test and do some drives, and, to get into college, you have to have good grades and write really good essays and kind of prove yourself a little bit, and to be a parent, it's just like, yeah, do your thing, bada bing, bada boom, congratulations, here you go. Anybody find that ironic? Because I do, right? You go to the hospital, and then, as you get ready to leave, they're like, bye, have fun. Can I have the instruction book with him? I don't know how he works. When my wife's here and when we brought our son Cruz from the hospital, he cried a lot. And for the first 2 days, he cried and he cried and he cried. And I don't think we slept much at all, but maybe an hour here and there. And the only way he would sleep is if we were holding him. And you hear stories from people, and you hear about kids crying and you're not going to get sleep. But this was a lot of not sleeping. And on the second day, the start of the second day when we were at home, we noticed that our son was starting to come down with a fever as well. And we couldn't seem to get the fever under control. And there became this moment as parents that we just realized something's not right. Yeah, he's crying a lot. And babies cry, but this is a lot of crying. And so we took him to the doctor. And we took him into the doctor's office, and the doctor kind of looked at him for a few minutes, and he left the room, and he came back in the room, and he said, I just admitted you to the hospital. Wait, what? And I'm like, wait, time out. Why are we going to the hospital right now? He's like, there's something wrong. I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, I don't know, there's something wrong. I'm like, tell me what's wrong. He's like, I don't know, but I can't look at my wife when she's here. I can't look at any of the girls on the front row. Thank you. You're all crying. You help this a lot. But here we are, and our 4-day-old is going into the hospital again. Dang it. So for the next 7 days, my wife and I spent every hour at the hospital. I kind of just want to skip this part. Is that cool? We spent every hour of the day there, and we just watched them run test after test on our little boy. We watched them hook up wires and do spinal taps and do all this stuff, and just like, man, what is going on? What is happening? We prayed for 3 years for this little boy. We couldn't get pregnant, and now he's hearing this. And I remember being at the hospital just crying out, God, what are you doing? Where are you? Is this your plan, God? Is this it? Because this sucks. I don't like it. God, take me. Let him live. These are the things I'm saying. I was angry. I was confused. Man, I didn't know what to do. It was awful. And some of you've experienced these types of things. And they're awful. And they're hard. And sometimes they don't go how we hope. I mean, quite honestly, sometimes life sucks, doesn't it? That's my theological statement for the day. Sometimes life sucks. But if we believe that the entire Bible is the Word of God for humanity, then what we quickly see is God has not censored out prayers of hurt, of brokenness, of pain, of anger. He has not censored these prayers out. I believe that he's included them for you and I to see in the Bible. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to not be okay in the midst of pain and suffering. And we see time and time again in the Bible where people are crying out. But how you and I respond to that frustration, to that disappointment, to that pain is absolutely critical to our faith. As my wife sat in the hospital, I will tell you my experience. God met our cries with compassion. God met our pain with understanding. Grant shared earlier, if you talk to Grant, I think he would tell you the same thing. And some of you go, wait, how? How? I want to know how. What I believe about God is that God's not some distant being who just looks down on earth and says, man, I hope this goes well. No, he understands our pain. God knows what suffering is all about, not merely in the way that God knows everything, but he knows what suffering is all about because he experienced it. Right? Jesus, God in the flesh, came to earth, and while he was on earth, at the end of his life, he was abandoned, he was denied, he was betrayed by every single person he had invested time, energy, and effort into. And on the cross, as he hung there, he was ultimately forsaken by God himself. God knows. It says this in Matthew 27. It says this, at about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? You see Jesus in the midst of it going, God, is this really the plan? You see, when it comes to pain and suffering, there is nothing, I think we can all agree, there's nothing more difficult than the loss of a family member or a loved one. But here what we see is that God knows what that pain is like. Not because he sees with greater clarity, but because he experienced it firsthand in the most severe way possible. You see, that's our God. He's not some distant being. He's a loving Father who can personally relate with everything you're experiencing. In the midst of the pain, in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of the brokenness and the sorrow, the Bible tells us that he will never leave you, he will never forsake you, and that all he is waiting for is for you and I to press deeper into him. Let me explain it this way. Have you ever had someone show up to your house and they kind of just show up unexpectedly? And maybe it's around dinner time or something like that, and your family are just getting ready to sit down for dinner, and you hear the doorbell ring, and you kind of go open the door, and you're like, oh, hey. It's just one of your friends, and they're like, hey, what's up? And you're like, just having dinner with my family, right? And they're like, okay. And you're trying to like run through your mind, like, why are they here? Did I forget something? What's happening? Did we make plans? And then finally you ask, like, why are you here? And like, I'm just came to hang out. I'm just here. Okay, well, we're going to eat. So is that cool? And like, yeah, cool. Can I just come in and watch? Okay, come on in, right? And this will all tie together. But in those moments, it's like, okay, you just want to come be a part of this. Like, you just want to come here. Like, yeah, I'm like, okay, come in. It's a little awkward, but here's where this goes next level for you and I. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. You and I have a God who wants to be a part of every single thing we do. You and I have a God who wants to be a part of every aspect of our life. What I mean in saying that is God's at the door just waiting for us to open it up. And sometimes we open up the door and we're like, oh, hey, God, we're just having dinner. He's like, cool, can I come in? I want to be a part. Oh, God, we're just sitting down to do homework and study, or we're just sitting down to watch a movie. Cool, I want to be a part. Let me come in. And I tell you that because what you need to know is you and I have a God who wants to be a part of our lives. He wants to be a part of our lives right in the middle of the mess, right in the middle of the chaos, right in the middle of the pain, right in the middle of the heartache. He just wants to come in and just be a part of it and just be there because you and I have a God who is for us. You and I have a God who is in our corner. And you need to know that today. That you and I have a God who wants to be a part of every single aspect and component of our life, right in the middle of the mess. And the Bible declares emphatically that God is with us and God is for us. He's here to take care of us. He's here to provide. He's here to protect. He's here to empower. And sometimes all you and I need to do is just go open up that door and go, God, I don't know. This is a mess. I don't know how to suppress this. I'm trying. And just say, come on in, God. Please be a part of this because I can't do this on my own. It says this in Romans 8:31 and 32. It says, what shall we say about such wonderful things as these? If God is for us, then who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? You and I, God has endured the ultimate sacrifice by giving up his son for us. And somehow we come to the conclusion in life that if God is for us, then we shouldn't experience pain, then we shouldn't experience suffering, then life shouldn't be hard. And that just isn't the case, is it? I'll illustrate it this way. I love my boys so much. I would do absolutely anything for my two boys. But the simple reality is I can't protect them from all the pain, suffering, heartache, and brokenness of the world, can I? I can't. They are going to experience those things. And when they do, does that mean that I love them any less? Absolutely not, right? But somehow we attribute these perverse motives and this odd way of thinking when it comes to our relationship with God. God, where are you? How could you let this happen to me? Church, God is with us, and God is for us, and that's the gospel. When you come into this place, you know what we want you to get more than anything? We want you to get the gospel of Jesus. And when you leave today, what I want you to know is God is for you and God is with you. Even when it doesn't make sense, God is for you and God is with you. Even in the midst of the brokenness, God is for you and he's with you. When you can't cross every T, when you can't dot every I, when you can't find the answer to every question, you have a God who is for you and you have a God who is with you. And in the darkest part of our journey, the thing that's going to keep you and I strong, the thing that's going to help us walk through, the thing that's going to help us overcome is remembering that we have a God who is in our corner, that we have the God of the universe on our side. Are you tired? Are you hurting? Does your soul need rest? Because today I believe we can rest in the grace of Jesus. And we can come to him, and we need to know it's okay to not be okay. Because God understands. This morning, we're going to end by taking communion together. And we're going to take communion a little differently. Because what's going to happen today is these guys are going to play a song. And the words won't be up on the screen. Ushers, you can begin to pass out communion if you'd like. The words aren't going to be on the screen, and that's intentional because today, what I want for you, our hope for you as a church, is that you would just be able to sit and be in the presence of Jesus today. Some of you, we just need to sit and just be in the presence of Jesus. The song these guys are going to sing is actually an incredible song. It's written from the perspective of Jesus in the garden as he is crying out, God, take this cup from me. This is more than I can bear. It's more than I can handle. But at the same time, Jesus says, but Father, if you don't, let my heart be for you. And for some of you this morning, this is a great opportunity for you just to sit and let the love and the presence of Jesus wash over you. Others of you, today, you can begin to express your trust in God. Others of you, you can begin to invite him into the middle of the mess. And even some of us, we can begin to just say, God, I'm broken and I hurt. And if I'm completely honest, I'm a little mad at you. And that's okay. But just hold on to the elements of communion. These guys are going to sing. Let's just be in the presence of Jesus for a moment. In all honesty, as you hold these elements of communion, there's really nothing that miraculous about these two cups in their simplest form as we hold them right now. But you see, the miraculous in this comes in the promise of Jesus. The miraculous in this comes with the promise that you and I have a God who is for us and a God who is with us. This becomes miraculous when we understand that this is a God relating with humanity, that this is God coming to the earth in form of man, enduring pain and suffering so that he can relate with us. And as we sit today and take communion, the promise isn't that we won't experience pain and suffering. The promise isn't that our life will be perfect, but the promise is that Jesus understands and that he's with us always. That's the promise. And as we take communion, we just get to remember and agree and understand that we are loved so much. Let's take the bread and the juice together. Will you stand with me? As we go out, I want to read one more passage to you. I kind of just want to speak it over us as a church. This is Revelation 21, verse 3 and 4. It says this, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and he will be and they will be his people. God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall the mourning nor the crying nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away.'" That's good news, right? Amen. As we go out, let's be people who just know we have a God who is for us, and we have a God who is with us, and that we get to be joyful and live in the midst of it. Amen. Love you guys. Have a great week. We'll see you again next week.